Hi, welcome to this Future Digital Awards interview from Juniper Research and Experian. I'm joined today by Kathleen Maley, who is the VP for Analytics Product Management at Experian. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Nick. Good to be here with you.
Appreciate it. Lovely to talk to you today. So today we're here to discuss a bit about data analytics, what we see currently with the market and where this is going. So let's start off with a really important question. I think one that a lot of people will want to know. What do you see as the current problems with data analytics?
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges is just the very, very broad umbrella of activities that is now being called analytics. And so I want to narrow the focus, just given, what I am working on right now, what Experian is working on right now is a very specific area of this broad world we call analytics. And that is really about model development, model scoring, model regulatory control, model risk management, and model deployment. So very, very specific. Within that specific realm, we have many of the same challenges that we've had for a long, long time. Number one, where is our data coming from? Is our data clean? Frankly, do we understand our data? This is something that is often overlooked and ignored. We think algorithms will produce results, but algorithms can only do exactly what they're told to do, right? We've all heard garbage in, garbage out, but it isn't just, is my data clean data? It's also, do I understand my data? Huge, huge, huge. We are thinking about things like lack of data. How do I close gaps where I have gaps in data? We think about things like, okay, if a model is built on history and my data are a year old, how can I really use that to predict the future? How is looking at the past going to tell me about the future? So the fresher my data is, the more current my data is, the better my model will reflect the future state in which I'm actually using it. Another big one, this is becoming less of a problem now, processing power. It used to be almost an impossible problem for me to solve. Any problem was an impossible problem for me to solve using mathematical optimization. I literally did not have the compute power I needed to run all of those. And an emerging one, it may not feel emerging, but in many ways it is, tech debt. The expense of maintenance, not only the models themselves, but the systems in which the models are built, the models are run, the models are managed. These are now becoming problems that are floating to the surface because there are alternatives. Before there's an alternative, we often don't think about it. There's an alternative now, so people are looking at their infrastructure saying, this is becoming actually quite costly.
Yeah, those are actually some really interesting challenges. And I think one I would like to throw in to sort of take us to our next question is really if we're talking about the size of businesses and how different types of businesses access insights and data analytics, really I think what we need to see is data analytics being democratized so that more businesses can actually gain this insight. How do you think that needs to happen?
Again, there are lots of ways to sort of think about this. If I bring it back to models, what I'm really talking about is how do I help businesses who otherwise wouldn't have access to models, have access to models? And I think about a couple of things in that regard. Number one, I am spending all day, every day, thinking about how can I build models more effectively? How can I deploy them more quickly? How can I make sure I have a consistent, repeatable process, not only because it means I can deliver more quickly, but because I can communicate with model risk governance and meet regulatory requirements with more ease and more consistency. I also have to think about what is the technology that is required to deploy it. And I'll throw one more in there that I hadn't thought about. we have a talent shortage right now that is unlike anything we've ever seen. Even the biggest in the business are struggling to hire data scientists right now. Imagine not already having a community of 150, 250 people built up. You're trying to start an analytics organization. You're starting to start a model development group. This is incredibly challenging. And so no organization can spend, no single organization whose primary purpose is lending, for example, can spend the amount of time studying this problem and working toward resolution the way I can. And so one of the ways I think I can contribute to expanding access to models is by making sure organizations that otherwise historically would not have been able to do this can now tap into these solutions that I'm spending all day, every day, thinking about and building across, with my teammates across Experian.
Yeah, that really makes sense. I think that's going to be a really important element going forward as we see sort of the value of analytics really accelerate and sort of become really important as almost sort of table stakes of you need to do this to operate effectively. So
yeah, absolutely. And why not at this point? 20 years ago, what we were talking about in terms of using models and building models and the data and the attributes and all of that was brand new. It was an edge problem. Nobody knew how to do it. We were all figuring it out. That's not our situation anymore. Now we know exactly what to do. We don't have to go into an organization that hasn't been doing this and experiment with them. We just say, oh, here it is. We've done it now for very successfully for the last 15 years. Here it is. Here's what it looks like. Easy peasy. We don't need to experiment anymore. We know what the answer is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So touching on that, knowing what the answer is, and I think this is a real chance for sort of experience in this area to shine, is what is Experian and what can Experian do to really sort of develop the data and the value of that data for businesses? How do you extract that value for businesses here?
Absolutely. So I'll say a couple of things because yes, we've solved a lot. Yes, we have a whole lot of solutions that are no longer edge problems, but data is always expanding, right? So think about, we've got all of our credit data. So the first thing is, most organizations just wouldn't have what we have. They would have information on their own clients, but again, back to lending as an example, if I'm a lender and I decline an application, I don't actually know what happened. Did they get a credit card, for example, from somebody else? Did they charge off, or did they make that other lender, did they have a very good relationship with that other lender? And I wouldn't know that. Experian knows that. So Experian can not only help an organization use the data they already have in their systems, we augment it with the information that they just otherwise would not have access to. We also have 20 years of history of using credit line level data and innovating, literally inventing meaningful pieces of information by combining those trade line level attributes in different ways. We call those attributes, and those end up being variables in models, right? So we are working with an organization's personal individual data, their own portfolios. We build models that are custom models, but we leverage what we know about the applications they declined or did not book. That could be another one. They approved, but the person didn't take the credit card, so didn't book. We augment that with our many years of history of inventing all of this. And should an organization be interested, we also are constantly expanding and working on new edge problems, non-traditional credit data. This is a very important one if we're talking about thin files. If we want to expand credit access, we can do that by using non-traditional credit data. Experian is very much at the center of all of this. We believe very much in credit inclusivity. It's good for our lenders. It's good for the individuals who otherwise wouldn't have access to credit. And so, you know, again, this is nothing to be sneezed at. This is nothing that is just, hey, let the algorithm do what the algorithm does. We know what happens when we let algorithms just do what algorithms do. Without the proper human oversight and understanding of what is happening, those models can become problematic. That is not something that we would ever want to have happen. So again, it comes back to this very, very deep history of working with this type of data and understanding how algorithms react to this type of data.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there's, you know, we could talk all day about the massive use cases there are for this data, and I think we're going to be discovering more and more of these all the time going forward.
Absolutely.
I just want to touch on a really interesting point you made earlier, and I think there's something interesting to explore here. You talked a little about the talent shortage in terms of data scientists and being able to leverage some talent pools to have these data analytics capabilities. And I think that really ties in really well with this theme going through the market at the moment of sort of the presence of low code and no code analytics in terms of how do you use these. So I think really what would be interesting is sort of what role do you see for those sort of low code, no code analytics capabilities, and what are vendors like Experian doing to really enable that sort of approach to make it really a lot easier for businesses?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked the question. This is a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart. Because I grew up as a modeler, that's how I started my career. I was building credit risk models. I may have a slightly different perspective on this than a lot of business leaders. When I think of low code and no code, I think about when I was building models, what were the things that slowed me down? What were the things that got in my way? What were the things that made it hard for me to get to the next step? I don't think about the things like, I understand this data. I know what this data means. I know what happens when we combine various pieces of data. I understand how to interpret a model performance based on the context of how it will be used. For example, every single model will produce false positives and false negatives. Well, under what set of circumstances am I more concerned with false positives? That might be, hey, you know, a false positive might be, you know, you send somebody out for a medical test and it comes back and the test says, hey, you've got something that we want to take a second look at. We can go and take a second look. We'll catch it, right? But in a false negative situation, hey, you're good. That biopsy we did, no problem. And it turns out you actually have cancer. So the model will give you the same results, false positive, false negative. I, as a human being, need to interpret. Same thing is true with lending. This person's going to charge off or this person's not going to charge off. Which matters to me more? If the person is going to charge off and I approve them, I'm going to lose some money. Do I care more about that? Or do I care, I'm going to decline somebody who's actually a good bet and I'm not going to make the revenue and that person's not going to get credit, you know, not going to have access to credit. Which one, as an organization, fits more with my strategy, with my core values? Which of those do I care more about? So when we talk about leveraging AI, when we talk about low code and no code, I think of it from a data scientist perspective. How can I do my job more quickly? We started by saying there are loads of organizations that would be very, very challenged to stand up their own data science organizations. When we have more time, I would also tell you why, in fact, in many cases, that wouldn't be the best business decision for them. So what that means is these centralized assets within Experian, these data scientists within Experian, how do I get them to be able to build these models as quickly, as efficiently, as effectively as possible so that they can serve more clients? They can build the model faster. So it's not about, hey, low code, no code, anybody can be a modeler. I'll tell you what, I know how to push buttons and flip switches. You stick me in the cockpit of an airplane and we're probably going down. And that's how I think of low code and no code around model development. It makes it a whole lot faster and more efficient for the modelers within Experian to build these custom solutions for our clients without the client have to accepting the risk of what it would mean to have 20 years of experience working with that data, to understand all the regulatory requirements, to know what might happen. An algorithm set loose is going to do what an algorithm does. And they only do exactly what we tell them. The less I know about lending, the more risk there is that that algorithm is going to do stuff I don't actually like, because I didn't think to control it before I implemented it. So I think low code, no code is hugely beneficial. I think users need to be very realistic about what that means. You don't want me flying your plane. So think about who you want building your models.
That's a really interesting perspective. I really like that, actually. And sort of our final question, I think we've already touched on to an extent, but I think there's more we can look at in terms of this. Obviously, you were talking about algorithms gone wild and doing sort of what they do without supervision, but I think one thing that people will be really, really interested in is sort of the implications of the growth of AI and machine learning in processes like data analytics. What does this really mean for analytics, and what sort of controls do we need to have in place to make sure that we're still getting the right business outcomes here?
Yeah, I think number one and number two and number three is to always know algorithms are actually quite dumb. Computers are dumb. Automation is dumb. They only do exactly what we tell them to do, right? You know, we call it predictive modeling. It's a misnomer. It's really historical pattern recognition that we then apply to the future. Machine learning is another misnomer. That machine isn't learning anything. We use a certain technique. A common one is gradient boosting. We develop, but once that algorithm is fixed, it is fixed, and it will do only exactly what we tell it to do. Models and algorithms do not introduce bias. They reveal bias. Algorithms and models can be used to reduce bias if we, the humans involved, know how to leverage them. So we will see more and more of this, right? Technology and the development of new technology is accelerating. AI has been defined as whatever is new. And I love that definition of AI. If you think about a hand calculator, used to be considered AI. The scanner at the grocery store used to be considered AI. Nobody even thinks about it anymore. Everything new eventually becomes old. And then there's a new set of edge problems for us to tackle. That will always be where we're focused, you know, and I think this is another example of, hey, do I want to be somebody, I've never done model development before, my organization has never really used it. Do I want to go through that level of experimentation and test and learn that others went through 20 years ago, or do I want to leap ahead and just know it's going to work? Because we've worked out all the kinks, we've worked out all the bugs. So it's not so much about AI, yes or no. It's at what stage, when do I want to leap in, at what level of development, at what level of understanding, you know? And so that's what I think about. It's not yes, no, it's where do I want to be on that spectrum? And how much experimentation do I want to be involved with versus I just want to know it's going to work and I want to start making more money and I want to go from 15% automated decisioning to, you know, a 60% automated decisioning. That can be done very quickly, very reliably, with very, very well-known and well-studied applications and techniques.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I particularly like the analogy about the scanners at the checkouts in shops. It's a great point. I really get that. But I wish we had the time all day to talk about this topic because it's so interesting, so dynamic. But for now, it's been a really fantastic interview. I appreciate your time and your insights, and congratulations again, Experian, on the award wins in our Future Digital Awards. And that's all from us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.